Welcome to Unlikely Intersections, where intent, impact, and inquiry inspire our conversation. I'm Dr. Terry Jackson. I'm here with my friend Dr. Philip Brown, and we are at the intersection. What is interesting about the intersection is we experience it every day. How we handle the intersection will dictate the trajectory of our life. And we think we have another great episode for you today. And that episode is just showing up.
Right. Exactly what we're doing this morning, right? We just keep showing up and planning for good things to happen.
That's right. Especially after Turkey Day, right?
Yes, sir.
Showing up, but at least for me, let me speak for me, showed up probably with a couple more pounds on me than before, but that's okay.
I did the same thing. You know, I have a lot of discipline around when I'm at work for morning workouts and things like that. Thanksgiving week, 0. But the feed was heavy. So, yeah, I jumped up on that scale Monday morning. I was like, yeah, time to keep showing up at the gym.
That's right. And, you know, just showing up authentically, right, which is quite interesting. And we're going to have an interesting conversation around just showing up and why it's important.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as number one, it's the hardest obstacle, right, is to just get started. That applies when you're exercising. That applies if you're trying to do some new venture. That applies kind of a lot of times when you're just in the middle of the grind of your regular day. You're just like, you know, here I am. It's the 100th day in a row I've done this, or the 1,000th, or the 5,000th day in a row. And, you know, you just put all these questions in your mind sometimes. But if you just keep showing up.
That's it. And there's a commitment to that, right? So commitment to yourself, right? Just to show up, to do what you said you were going to do. And it's difficult from time to time to keep that commitment to yourself because there's so many obstacles out there and the mind begins to play tricks. Well, you know, I did it today and I'll take a break tomorrow and then I'll do it again the day after that. And then all of a sudden the day after that becomes 2 or 3 months down the line because of the lack of commitment from just showing up for yourself.
I'm a big believer in that showing up for yourself, but we do mental tricks as well. I was trying to play a mental math trick on myself this morning, right? Because I knew exactly what time I needed to get up to be able to make it all happen, still get here on time, keep this commitment. You know, so the easy commitment to drop is the one to myself, right? Which for me this morning was exercise. And so, you know, that clock goes off and immediately I start doing math in my head. I'm like, okay, if I hit snooze, that's 9 minutes, and then maybe I can do it twice, or maybe no, but then if I, you know, and so this whole negotiation with yourself. And one of the renowned athletes that did a piece on this when he was alive was Kobe Bryant, and he talked about his goal setting and around what he was doing to improve. And he said, I'm not going to negotiate with myself. He said, I signed that contract a long time ago, and so what he put out there, he stuck to. I think there's a big message in that for all of us.
Yeah, it is, because we all negotiate with ourselves, right? I said this morning, man, I was going to get up, I was going to hit the Y, get me a good workout in, come over here. That didn't happen. Now I told you not long ago, I'm going to go to the gym and get me a workout after this, right? But I'm not going to negotiate with myself. I'm going to take Kobe's advice. And like he said, I signed that contract a long time ago. So now it comes down to what Nike used to say, you got to just do it.
Absolutely. Interesting thing, this process of negotiating with yourself just incurs debt. Right? Like you just described how you're going to repay your debt to yourself. You're going to use time that you had budgeted for something else. You know, it doesn't matter what it is because it's put off now. And, you know, domino effect, until you hit the catch up, you know, you're recovering from debt. And it's fascinating how often we do that. And what I've seen so many times, especially in professional people who have hard driving careers, is that sometimes the first thing to go is that commitment to their own health and well-being. And that is a shortcut that just doesn't pay off in the long run.
No, it doesn't. I can speak for me. Having been an athlete, but moving into the professional arena did not work out as often as I should have. Don't work out as often as I should have, and so that's showing that I don't have a commitment for my health, which really drives everything, right? We're sitting here doing this podcast. However, if I wasn't halfway healthy, I wouldn't be here, right? Because I'd be somewhere else doing probably the hospital or some facility that wouldn't enable me to do what I was doing. I've invested more in myself from a professional perspective in degrees and reading and not always taking the advice of what I've read, knowing that it works, right? I've spoke about this many times. All diets work, but you have to work the diet. So it's not the diet, it's me. And so I have to recommit to what it is that's best for me and show up what I have to show up as my best self every day in everything that I do.
Yeah, I like to think of it as sharpening the saw.
Yes.
And, yourself is the saw. And then I tie it to, one of my favorite leaders, who's Abraham Lincoln. I love Lincoln. I read all I can about Lincoln. But a quote that's attributed to him says, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." And so often we don't allow ourselves that sharpening period like we need to. And it's a whole lot of things, not just physical fitness, right? It's the emotional fitness, it's financial, it's all the elements. And at the end of the day, we put forth a much better product if we have taken care of all those elements inside ourself. We come at things with integrity then, which I use in the sense of being whole, right? So I'm in a fundamentally good place myself, which means for your and my interaction, I can give my level best.
Right.
And my best is going to be the best I really can deliver. It's not
Right.
going to have a gap in it because I didn't work out this morning. I'm thinking about, well, I really let myself down.
Right, right. That's right. I tell you what I have done thus far, understanding all of this and so that I can show up as my best self is I've began to write down my goals for 2023 already to include health, right? To include financial and include, relationships, with people. And so I have taken that journey already. So now I know exactly for 2023, exactly what I want to do so that I can show up as my best self. One of the questions I have around showing up, and this is a very interesting topic, is when do we show up as our authentic self or as our alter ego? And let me give you an example. There are often times when we are going to meetings, and those meetings may be with people who, for whatever reason, maybe we don't get along with. Maybe they have a certain perception of us. And so in order for us to be, quote unquote, accepted and to continue to be in those meetings around these tables, we sometimes show up and we choose a different personality to display so that we can be more cordial, people get along so people can like us versus as our authentic self. That question hit me this morning because I know in this local area there are certain people, if I mention their name, they say, oh, we suggest that you don't hang around him or be a part of his organization. I'm like, why? And for whatever reason, these people aren't liked. And so in order to be in these meetings that they want to be in, I have to show up as a little bit different so I can still remain in the meetings and get the information, but not show up showing any kind of favor to a different type of mindset, because in that particular meeting, that mindset is not liked. And if you display it, then what happens is you don't get the invitation to the meeting again.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, I think, and I find myself in all kinds of things all the time where my best course of action, I think, is usually to just listen. Um, One thing I've found, I've never been thrown out of anything for listening too much. Right? Like, and so it brings up an interesting point because what you're talking about is, do we have inclusive environments, really? That's what it really comes down to.
That's right.
And but the answer to that is that we definitely have a tendency, humankind has a tendency to feel safer around similarity. But what a impediment to performance, right? Like, what we know from information, from performance results, is that more inclusive teams perform higher. And it's a sloppy process. It's at times. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a team, a business unit, a care team for health, or whatever. Same thing. Sometimes that process is sloppy, and it's that sloppiness that folks tend not to tolerate, likely perceived as a threat to what they believe. And I think it's interesting as we try to seek groups of people who really are authentic, we find ourselves in places where the success just flows. And so, sometimes it's like, well, let's test this group and see if it's something that I want to belong to, because in those environments where there's a lack of authenticity, more and more, I think, as you get more senior, as you get more accomplished, if you will, you can be more selective, and at some point, it just gets to the thing of the act needs to be over because we have serious stuff we're trying to do.
Exactly.
That's how I look at it.
Exactly. I remember being called to a meeting, prominent attorney in town, and there was a discussion about youth. So a friend of mine said, "Hey, Terry, I want to invite you to this meeting." So we attend the meeting in town, and we're sitting and we're discussing the needs of the youth in the city, more specifically the needs of African American youth in the city. And one of the ladies there indicated, "Well, what can we do to open up more of the basketball gyms at night to give people the opportunity to go have somewhere to go?" And I asked, when you open the gym, or do you plan on having tutors there? Do you plan on having teachers there? I said, because the gym is a good place to go, but our youth need to do more than play basketball. Part of the challenge is the education they're not receiving. So if we can open gyms, we can find teachers who can also teach. I found out later from my friend, once I left the meeting, that the lady said he shouldn't be a part of these meetings any longer because he's too serious. And I told him, life is serious. And so when I showed up that day as myself, my authentic self, that's the type of response that I received, is he shouldn't be a part of this because they didn't want to be that serious and talk about how we can really help improve and empower the youth. They just wanted them to go play ball, as we've heard on ESPN and other places, just dribble, right?
Right.
Life is about more than just dribbling.
Yeah, and what an interesting spin on the theme of showing up, right? Because sometimes the best way to show up is to not be in certain things.
That's the truth.
When it becomes evident that something is not what it's intended to be, or it's some veiled attempt at something else. Sometimes showing up in your authentic self means not being there, but being somewhere else, and it's fine to test a lot of different things. And I think that one of the quotes that I like is also by Warren Buffett, And he says the difference between successful people and highly successful people is that highly successful people say no to almost everything. And you scratch your head on that, and you're like, okay, but we were talking about keep showing up and everything. There's also a how many at bats phenomenon do you get, right? So again, the more success that you have because you are showing up as your authentic self, you are contributing, right? Because we're all greatly interdependent, right? You are a contributing member and you're learning, you get asked more, right? And so, you know, you end up having to turn down a lot of things and being highly selective so that you can show up fully in what you're committing to. You certainly can't diffuse yourself all over the place and be in everything, because number one, none of us really have that kind of expertise to be in everything, right? And being able to marshal our energy in the right ways to say, I'm going to be 100% all in on this. And I'm coming at that from a position of having done it wrong. Like I've learned that the hard way in my career, early career especially. You feel like if you don't say yes to every opportunity, nobody's going to ask you again.
That's right.
And so next thing you know, you look up and you're basically, 4 feet under the water, just wondering like, how am I going to come up for air? That's a lesson that's often learned from experience. But if we can share anything with anybody, or if I can today, I'd say, be careful. Make sure that what you launch into, you can launch into all the way, because showing up means it really does mean bringing yourself. And one of the things we do in a lot of our meetings at Novant Health is a meeting evaluation at the end of the meeting. And part of that question process is, was your voice heard today? And that sets a two-way expectation. One is that the group is going to listen, but two is that you're going to speak up. And so when you talk about showing up, it's bringing yourself, your best self.
There are 3 things that come to mind. 1, the power of saying no. 2, being very strategic in where you show up and how you show up. And 3, being, when you show up, make sure that it's within what your purpose is. And so how does it align with your purpose, right? And so the strategy comes in realizing I can't be at every table. And I remember when I first moved back to Wilmington, people were calling on me and pulling me left and right and sitting around tables. And all of a sudden I began through just observation realizing that this is not a table that I need to sit at. Simply because, at least for a thought process, I always say I want to be the dullest pencil at the table. I don't want to be the sharpest pencil at the table all of the time. And then you begin to, just through observing, you begin to see certain dynamics you don't want to be a part of. Certain dynamics you do realize you want to be a part of. And you want to be able to, whatever table you're at, you want to be able to execute. Right. And that's a key. So for me, showing up with my authentic self, it means we can get something done. We can make some things happen. We can affect some change or transformation, which is my favorite word. Have an impact to help transform. For those who seriously want transformation, some people are just playing lip service to it, right? So when I show up, I'm going to show up authentically in hopes that we are going to make an impact on something.
One of the things I like to think through is how you say no is important. And early on, when you're learning the skill, you sometimes want to feel like you have to have a justification. No is an answer by itself. It also opens up other opportunities, right? So my no almost always opens up a chance to recommend somebody else, which is really strategic, right? Because it helps me develop other people. It helps me try try to track people into things that I understand are attached to their sense of purpose, like you were talking about earlier. It helps me diversify groups based on who else I know may be in the group and who I perceive as missing. I don't always get it right, but I definitely always think that way. And so, you know, a lot of times an answer of no to my personal involvement actually creates more opportunities and more positivity for the situation and for me personally than trying to do it when I know I don't have the right amount of time to dedicate to it.
Yeah, it goes back to commitment, right? Showing up, understanding that commitment, that one, your commitment to yourself. If I do it, I want to do it in such a way that I'm able to show up authentically as myself, fully 100%, not just 40% of me. And then the commitment to the group or the organization that you're meeting with, right? You want to be able to fulfill whatever you say whatever you say you're able to do, right? And to maintain that integrity of self and integrity with those that you're with. So it's extremely important to understand the power of showing up and never showing up being, 50%. Let me take that back. Because I can think about Michael Jordan showing up on the basketball game, having the flu, and having just a great game. But that's the exception, right? Normally when we show up, we need to show up 100% of who we are, bringing all of our faculties to the table.
Yeah, we see that. We see that in medicine, right? Is that after, especially in the wake of COVID, now it's become much more accepted if you're not feeling well to say, "Hey, I'm not feeling well. It's in my best interest and everyone else's best interest if I don't show up." We've even had that in this show, right?
Yeah,
When somebody don't feel good, we have to postpone.
Yeah,
that's okay. That's part of showing up all the way. The other thing I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about a little bit in terms of what it means to just show up is distraction. And man, you see it now. It's funny. You may see it more in open meetings because you can see it, but in the Zoom era, it's present even though you don't see it. Is folks being on too many things at one time, right? Maybe it's a barrage of text messages coming in, checking emails on another screen while you're in the thing. And from the brain science, we know there's a huge efficiency cost to that. Every time I switch my attention to something else, I've got to pay the debt of catching back up to what I missed and to resetting my focus around, whatever it is that I've just switched to. And if you look at the amount of distraction we have in our daily lives, it's amazing that we get anything done.
That's right. That goes back to that whole thing we've been taught about multitasking, right? Yeah, you have to be able to multitask. But I'm doing 5 things at probably 10% efficiency. So how much sense does it make? Then let me simply focus on this one particular activity. Let me do this 100%, show up 100% for myself, excel at it, and then move to the next, right? And I'll go back to an example of Michael Jordan. I remember, we both saw him come up in Wilmington, and I remember everywhere he went, he took a basketball. There was always a basketball in his trunk, and so he always had access to it. And then when he made the decision in high school to drop baseball and to drop football and focus solely on basketball, whereas a lot of our other friends were still playing football, basketball, and baseball, right? That was, in my opinion, what enabled him to really take his game to many different levels, right? Because it was just the focus on those skills around that particular sport that enabled him to excel and become who we know, as many call him, the GOAT today.
Yeah, that deep sense of focus, and you can see it. I mean, they're all kind of. I saw a video just yesterday of Michael, and it's shooting a free throw, and and he looks at Dikembe Mutombo and he says, "Hey, Mutombo, this is for you." And he closes his eyes and then he shoots the free throw and he makes it. That's full focus, right?
That's right. That's right.
And that ability to focus fully and totally immerse yourself in whatever is happening, that's probably tied to his performance in the flu game, right?
Right.
Like he just got himself into the game and willed himself away from the flu temporarily. And you could see it when he came out, how he looked like he was, struggling big time. But when he got back on the floor, he was fully focused on what he was trying to do. That level of focus is uncommon. We see it a lot of times. Like, I've had a chance to experience that a lot as a surgeon, right? Because you get in critical parts of the operation, and it's almost like the whole world slows down and you're in this sense of flow and everything is about only what you're doing in the moment. And that's a really fun place to be. That is when, that is being in the moment to the nth degree. And it's just so exciting. But, you can set yourself up for that. You talked about earlier how you set yourself up for 2023 success by doing your goals and everything. And I'm in the same boat. I've done a lot of my goals for next year already. I use a thing called the Full Focus Planner, written. So I do handwriting because it helps me remember it. And a part of that is not only the annual goals, but it's daily. What do you want to do? And one of the things I figured out for me personally that was helpful is my number one thing on my list every day of the week when I'm working, so at least a minimum of 5 days a week, sometimes more, is actually exercise. Because I know that's what makes me feel better. I know that because I wrote it down, if I don't do it, I'll be mad at myself, so I'm more likely to do it. It's that contract with myself. And I make sure that I actually write that down as a to-do every day as number one. And it's amazing how just that one little step helps. It also gives you something to go back to, because at the end of the week I can review 5 out of 5, right? Ooh, 4 out of 5. That's probably okay. But man, if I get a 3 out of 5 week or a 2 out of 5 week, I know that I've deprioritized myself, so I'm not going to be able to show up fully in a lot of things because I'm not going to feel as well. And that's just what works for me. Somebody's thing might be meditation. It might be family time. It might be something that they're working on at a given time that they need to do every day. It might be, write X pages in my book. It might be something, as simple as spend time with my family or get 7 hours of sleep. But something that says I'm going to invest in myself so that I can then show up fully for the rest of the team.
Yep.
To me is a big step in the right direction that all of us could consider.
I would agree with you 100%. I always say that you can't take care of anyone else if you can't take care of yourself. First things first, right? It's you. It's about you. It's about me. It's about me taking care of me first. And normally when I take care of me, everybody else does well around me. And I've observed that over the years. And so now with my 2023, and I've written down my goals as well, and I've gone into some detail about dietary regimen. Now it's really about execute, because that's about showing up for me. And the best investment that anyone can ever make is the investment in themselves. Showing up for yourself on a day-to-day, I'm going to say a second-by-second basis, right? And when you started talking about you can check the 5 for 5, right? You can begin to measure exactly how you're doing, right? Whether you're letting yourself down or you're fulfilling the goals. And you'll find that, at least I found, when I write them down and I measure myself that way, so many opportunities present themselves. And the time that I didn't think that I had, I did have, and probably even more, because it's real succinct and showing up for myself on a day-to-day or minute-by-minute basis.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, because it's a reprioritization, and all of a sudden the workflow just works. And I see it. I've seen it so many times with friends or colleagues, and it almost becomes a martyrdom. That, I had all this stuff to do, so I didn't take care of myself. Next thing you know, they're on blood pressure medicine, or depressed, or and so well, maybe it's as simple as changing the priorities of what you're doing, so that you can be present and show up fully, but also take care of yourself. Because the thing about taking care of yourself is it changes the way the world occurs to you. When you feel well in general, when you feel like you are in a good place, you see more abundance. There's more space in your head to not jump to conclusions. There's more curiosity. All the positive things that we talk about really flow from showing up for yourself and making sure that your own health, well-being is done. And it has nothing to do with how much you can do for somebody else, except that the better you take care of yourself, as you said earlier, the better you can show up and take care of other folks.
And it really shows how serious you are about you, right? We have to be serious about us. We spend too much time being serious about so many other things, whether it's our education, it's our occupation, our family members. Let me see how serious I am about me. Because oftentimes we joke, well, I don't take myself seriously. Why don't you take yourself seriously, right? You are the engine that makes everything go. So we have to show how serious we are about ourselves, and that shows in how we show up for ourselves. If we are showing up as a very serious, disciplined individual, or for lack of a better phrase, if we show up as a buffoon. And no one, at least I can't say anyone, at least I don't want to, let me speak for me, don't show up as a buffoon, right?
Yeah, I play both sides of the coin on taking myself seriously, right? In terms of my health, well-being, doing the things I need to do to take care of my family and all that, taking myself very seriously, right? But for me, what that means is showing up fully. And there are a lot of times in a group setting when we're doing work, I don't take myself seriously at all, right? I have to announce that a lot of times because as you get older, I'm pretty naturally loud and I can put together a pretty good story.
Yeah.
If I'm not careful, people feel like, I'm given an edict when I'm just voicing an opinion. So I've learned the hard way that it's important for me to announce, like this may be nonsense, and if it is, please say so, right? Because I don't want us to get down the rabbit hole of something that doesn't make sense, but I also want to show up, right? So if I have a thought, I want to put it in the room, and sometimes those are just crazy ideas that don't have any merit. Right. And so I don't take that seriously. If other folks have better ideas, I'm all about it, because it's about how we collectively make things happen. I'm a big believer in interdependence. Our well-being is intimately connected as fellow humans, and to the extent that we don't take care of that with a certain group or with certain individuals within a group, we're all underperforming, because we depend on one another so much.
I heard someone say that interdependence is the highest level of human interaction, right? Because what I'm really saying is I can depend on you, you can depend on me, we can depend on each other, we can get some things done, versus the whole concept about independence, right? Which is just a farce. Because no man is an island. We can't do anything alone. We always need others to help us and assist us, as we have our engineer who helps us with this particular podcast, right? And we are grateful for him. But we show up as our best, and we know that he shows up as his best, and we have to continue to do that. And when you show up authentically as yourself, it lets you get a feel for everything. I like to consider myself a pretty intuitive person, and so I like to get a feel for a particular environment, a particular topic, a particular person or people in my observation, and I try my best not to, in showing up, show up with any preconceived notions about anything. I like to say I don't want anything to muddy my water. Let me make my own decisions about some certain things.
Well, you're talking about a formula for empathy, right? Because empathy really only exists when you can feel what somebody else is feeling, right? Just intellectualizing it falls short.
Yes.
You know, it really is about being able to feel that. Doesn't mean at all that you're incapacitated by the same feeling that may be incapacitating them or holding them back, but it does mean that you have some sense of feeling of what that is. And that empathy piece is such a connection to our interdependence, right? Because we really, when we feel what the other one's feeling, it helps us understand the boundaries of working together much better, right? Because if we don't do a better job of showing up together and figuring out how we mutually move forward, then at some level we're working against each other, which is going to definitely arrest our progress. I mean, it can't possibly do anything else. But you know, the whole concept of interdependence and knowing that I'm going to need help and that I'm going to be expected to help makes one of the hardest things in the world easier. And that's change. Because, you know, if I know I'm going to need help and come into it with that understanding, then basically I'm acknowledging up front that in order to get to that better place, I will have changed. And I'm also acknowledging that because I'm going to be needed in that interaction, part of whatever was my core belief is also going to carry on. So I have set up the perfect situation to navigate change for myself by showing up with the mentality that I'm going to need help and I'm going to be needed.
I would like to say that showing up for yourself also includes critical thinking, because what you just walked us through is your critical thought around what it means to get something done. I understand what my boundaries are, and that means I'm showing up authentically. So I know what my boundaries are. I know what my skill set is, what I can accomplish, what I can't accomplish. But I also recognize that in showing up and acknowledging that, there are going to be others whose skill sets will complement mine, that I don't have to depend totally on me, as we talked about the interdependence. Now I'm depending on others in the room to help us collectively move forward toward goals or aspirations. And in so doing, I've had to think critically about and assess who I am as a person and what my skills are, and do somewhat of an assessment of their skills to say that, hey, these are the right people in the room, or if all of these people are not the right people in the room, who else needs to be included in the process? And so showing up for self also enables one to do that real assessment of self and the environment to understand what's needed to move forward.
And that's how you show up so deeply, right? Because it basically, it's helping you to focus on what you do really well without having to worry about the other pieces, because they're linked through other people. And it's always all about the people. Anytime we want to get something great done, it's about having the right people. That's where it starts. It doesn't matter whether you're recruiting for a business unit, for a sports team, for an academic anything. It's all about having the right people that can function together. And by having that trust, that piece of trust that says, I know I'm not going to be relied too heavily on things that are outside my area, right? There might be a loose ball, I might have to dive on it. We all got to do that from time to time, right? We all, you know, somebody might get sick, I might have to teach their class today. And I've got enough expertise to do that, right? But I'm not going to be consistently dependent on to deliver a whole lot of stuff that's outside of my core expertise.
That's right.
That works great. It also helps you to then develop because you're around people who are more skilled or gifted or able than you in other areas. And so it's a perfect recipe for growth because you can grow into those strengths and skills based on who you surrounded yourself with, but only when you trust them and only when you're really willing to learn. It doesn't work if you go and say, I wish I was as good as that person and, you know, I'm going to try this way and I'm going to show people. Yeah, probably not. Probably not.
I hear people say all the time, I wish I were as good as this. I said, you can be. You can be. It just takes you showing up and understanding that I'm here to learn. I'm here to become my best self. And in my best self, that means I'm always learning as my best self. I'm learning what to do and I'm learning what not to do, the power of saying no, right? And how do I say it and all the opportunities. So the best thing we can do, as Dr. Rao says, is work on ourselves. And to work on yourselves means that you're going to show up authentically each and every day as who you are and truly understand who you are and your role in all that you do.
And I love to put it in the context of, I'm always saying nobody cares what you know until they know how much you care.
That's right. That's right.
And a lot of times that shows up with how much you care about yourself, not in a selfish way, right? But you care about your performance. That means, at the end of this show, I'm going to say, Terry, how did I do? Right? Like we always ask our engineer, hey, coach, how do we do?
That's right.
You're like, well, that was great. Yeah, we don't know if he's telling us the truth or not. But the truth is, that feedback piece,
That's
right?
That's right.
And so showing the other members of the team that you care about your performance. It's really your accountability. I like to, I think a lot of times we get accountability in the wrong context, right? So we want to hold them accountable. Well, you can't really hold people accountable. What you really are saying is that, I was counting on Terry to show up today. His accountability to me was to show up today and vice versa. We both did it, and so here we are. But the point is that accountability is what the unit is counting on each person for. And that goes to the standards that you have for the team, how you're going to treat each other, also what you're going to deliver. It's all the things, right? But accountability is an individual responsibility to deliver something to the greater performance, the greater good, as you say.
You just set up a great example. Last week, in the world of sports and football, this whole accountability conversation came to a zenith with the New York Jets and Zach Wilson, who was the quarterback. And there were certain people saying that he doesn't know what it means to be accountable. He grew up in a very affluent family and he's never had to be accountable, so he's not accountable to his teammates in the classroom. And as a result of that, he was benched, because they didn't see the accountability of him saying, hey, this is my team. I take responsibility and accountability for the lack of performance, for me not studying the opponent well, not doing my film study. So I didn't understand the tendencies. As a result, I created these turnovers, and I didn't perform well as a quarterback, and I need to do better. He didn't accept any of that, and as a result, he was benched.
Yeah, he didn't show up, right?
No, he didn't show up.
He did not show up to do the work, right?
That's
and,
right.
When you talk about performance, and I'll use a surgical team, there's a lot of behind the scenes prep that has to happen before the operation itself. I mean, a lot. Like, it's the whole, did we get the right testing? Is our diagnosis correct?
Mm-hmm.
Did we assess the patient ahead of time to understand that they were safe to undergo this operation? Did everybody bring all the equipment we need into the room, right? Did we check to see, is it safe to put this patient to sleep based on their history? So there's all this showing up piece that happens ahead of the actual performance. Those are all accountabilities for different members of the team. any one of those falls through, and a life or death situation can occur when you're talking about the operating room. Not as high stakes in a football game. It's mostly about
Yeah, win or
who
loss.
wins or
Right,
loses,
right, right,
or
right.
money, depending on the level
That's
of the
right.
game. But the point is the same, right? Is that folks doing what they're supposed to do, that showing up occurs at every stage of the game.
Yes.
It's not just, I got talent, I'm going to show up and, make my part happen. No, there's a lot of background that goes with that.
Yep. I agree with that 100%. And we show up for each other on this show every day. We do a little bit of our background research, right, to find out more about the topic that we're going to discuss, because oftentimes our topics come a couple of days before we go to do the shows, right? But we understand that in showing up for each other, we're actually showing up for ourselves, because we definitely want our podcast to be impactful, have good intentions, and we want it to be a message where someone can learn from and take some nuggets away from this that will help them hopefully live a better quality life.
Yeah, it works for me. Like, honestly, one of the things I enjoy about this is I always learn.
Yes.
When we have our conversations. It's an opportunity to listen to a different perspective, right? I mean, we have a lot of commonality, but fundamentally we're very different people. Have a very different perspectives on a lot of things, and I find myself changed pretty much after everything. It's a different thing to think about. I'm like, wow, I didn't really think about it like that.
That's
That's
right.
Yeah, and then I always goes to, well, what if I started thinking about it like that? And then the next thing you know, carry it out somewhere with me that's more broad perspective. And it's like, yeah, doors open up in terms of what can possibly happen in all walks of life.
That's right. Showing up for yourself ultimately is a celebration of who you are, right? And what you stand for. And I know that I like to celebrate, who I am, knowing that I'm a work in progress, but I'm going to show up my best every time, even though there's continuous learning that's happening, right? I'm going to reflect as you reflect and say, wow, that was a different perspective. I never thought about that before. As you say, how can I think about that a little bit differently, right? But that's what it really is. It's a celebration of you, a celebration of who you are when you show up ultimately as your best self.
Yeah, that's it's also how you get believers, right? Like, and it's not Jonestown type believers, right? It's it's like believers in a purpose.
That's right.
And folks begin to see that you are in the struggle and you're all in on the struggle, right? And then things are happening. They're seeing it, and they're seeing you continue with that, right? And next thing you know, another person says, that purpose, I mean, it looks funny what he's doing, but I sense there's a value to it. So then you get 2, and then you get 3, and then you get 4 or 5. Next thing you know, you've got a bunch of people that are sort of, putting their best self into some grand purpose. And at the end of the day, that's pretty much how every great thing that's ever happened.
That's right. It's the collective. It's the understanding of the purpose, right? It's everyone showing up as their best selves so that you can move it along. And oftentimes it moves along exponentially when you have that right equation of showing up as a collective and understanding what everybody's role is and the importance of interdependence.
And one of the things I love to add in a discussion about high-performing teams and what it means to show up for each other is there are certain times where a given member of that group just has to be carried along by the others because there's a struggle at that time. If it's an athletic team, maybe the person is hurt. If it's a medical team, maybe the person has something going on at home, or maybe they have a personal health issue, or maybe they've been through a particularly rough time with a difficult case that they were attached to, and they need to be supported. And showing up means I'm gonna give that support when that support is needed, and I'm gonna accept that support when that need is from me.
Yeah. I like to say sometimes one hand washes the other, and both hands wash the face.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's a great way. That's a great way to think about it.
Yep. So,
well, I think we have had another great episode. I know I've enjoyed it,
Yes,
and
I
showing
have.
up for myself. I guess that was one of the major objectives. Right?
yeah, that's right. It had to show up.
But we hope that our listeners have enjoyed it, and if you have, we hope you'll check us out at unlikelyintersection.com, or go to our YouTube page, Unlikely Intersections. Like, subscribe, share. Catch me on LinkedIn at Doc Phillip Brown or Terry.
And you can catch me, Terry Jackson, PhD, at LinkedIn, or you can catch me on Facebook. And we hope that you've enjoyed this episode. As Dr. Brown said, please go to our website, go to our YouTube page, like, subscribe, even recommend topics that you'd like for us to discuss.
We'll see you at the next intersection.